Chris, I hope you're having a great day. Welcome into the game here in Tuscaloosa.
Good to be with you, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Certainly a lot of conversation around this Alabama football team. And let me roll over a question that we just got in the 3 o'clock hour. What's your thoughts on Alabama's offensive line just as an individual group?
Been very impressed with it. Had some questions at the beginning of the year, some youth, but Jonas played well. Pierce Barker's done a good job. Overall, individually, they've done a very good job. Collectively, they've been really good. Now, I think the mobility of the quarterback really helps them out in pass protection a little bit, and I think they've done a good job in the run game. They've graded out very well for me. I know the coaches there, at Alabama are fairly pleased with them. There's some areas, I'm not saying they're perfect, not saying that they've graded out as well every game, but it's been pretty solid. And going into the year, like anything else, I'm looking at a couple of guys wondering how good they're going to be. They're a tick better than I thought they would be.
Okay. Look, and the question that came up is really sometimes you don't see them getting that push that we have typically, and there's been some situations where it was 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 and really didn't get that push. Is that just lack of consistency or is that just maybe they're not as physical as we've come to expect?
Let me explain that. When you throw the football as much as they do now, that's what the byproduct is. And I try to explain that a lot of times that if you're going to step back in pass protection most of the time, you get out of the habit of coming off with a flat back and rolling your hips. It's a different discipline. I mean, and it's like anything else. It's not they don't practice it, but they're not as good run blocking as they have been in the past. But that is the case for any team that's really good throwing the football and constantly drop stepping. That's the byproduct of it. So it's one of the things I always say. Hey, look, I'm as impressed as anybody with scoring 60 points and lighting it up. But when you need to call upon that, we're going to block a loaded front, an 8-man front, and come off the ball with a low back, well, all of a sudden you're calling upon something that you're not doing as much. So it's just not out of practice. You are out of rhythm a little bit because they're two different disciplines. If you think about pass blocking and you think about offensive line play, it's the most unnatural athletic thing that we do in football. What do we do when you get out and play football as a youngster? You pick it up, you run, you throw, you catch. You don't see many kids on the playground lining up in three-point stance and backing up and setting and setting their feet shoulder width apart. You don't see them coming off and keeping their rear end down and keeping that flat back. It's very unnatural. So when Alabama runs the football more and more, and that's what they have been, they're a great run blocking team. Now that they're doing a lot of pass blocking, you're not in that rhythm, and it does affect it when you want to line up and run the football. It does have an effect, and that's kind of what I'm saying is what I'm alluding to. I didn't mention it, is some of the things that they're just not as good at as they've been in the past. But it is expected with their style of play.
Chris, let's go back to the Alabama-Missouri game. We love to pick your brain. Obviously, you're a scout, someone who's worked in the college industry, the NFL industry. I cannot wait to kind of hear your analysis of Alabama-Missouri.
Well, I thought they did an outstanding job. Defensively, I thought they stood up and kind of made a statement. I thought they played very, very well against an offense that's very capable. I think that if you put pressure on Drew Lock, I think he's not nearly as effective. But I think people thought, well, they're going to score a bunch of points. And coming off Arkansas game and gave up points, a lot of them were cheap, late and whatnot, they still scored 31 points. So going into it, I think they took the challenge. You got to get better, guys. And you're going to get graded on your standard on what you do. And I thought they answered the bell offensively. I mean, I think offensively there's been a level of consistency of explosive plays that's quite frankly I'm struggling to find an example of when somebody has been this effective throwing the football vertically as well as they can without any errors. It's been a problem. You remember at the beginning of the year that one of the things that I said was, I think Tua can make big-time plays, but can he protect the football consistently? Because you saw all you got to go by is the half of game in the national championship game. Well, he certainly answered that question with a resounding, dominance of not only making big plays but mistake avoidance.
As a coach, you think the same way as Coach Saban, always looking for a way that your football team can progress, and you take little problems and you make sure that their attention to detail. Where do you see this Alabama football team? Is there a lot of areas that you still could see the growth and maybe continue to improve?
Yeah, pass coverage, particularly with the linebackers, communication issues, still letting guys running free at times. Those are areas that I think that when you kind of look into it, and this is what you do, folks, when you break down tape. I think sometimes people get out of hey, well, my team won, they're great, and go to the water cooler line. That's not the way it works, as you know, Ryan, and the staff room. You don't run around and saying, yeah, we won 66 to whatever the score was. You go in there, and it's to get your position group to play as the effort, assignment, technique, result, the discipline like you want it done on that play that was called. And I think there's a lot of areas that they can improve there. Now, that may seem like nitpicking. Well, that's what your job is as a coach, to do that better. I think they can do that. I see some improvement in the secondary. I understand the youth there, but I think covering in the middle areas is an area that they can really improve upon.
Chris, I want to, before we move to Alabama and Tennessee, I want to go back and just give you a chance. What went right for LSU? What went wrong for Georgia? Huge win there in Baton Rouge for the Tigers.
The biggest thing that stood out to me is LSU defensively. Two things stood out to me. Defensively, LSU had a really good game plan. They were, quite frankly, outcoached against Dan Mullen in Florida in Gainesville and turned it around and really did a great job against Georgia. Georgia ran the football well on that first series. Dave Aranda reduced his front, and which is the simple way of saying you put your defensive tackles down towards the center, where the ball is. So they played, and they put extra numbers in the box. So they took the run away, and they ran zone pressures, not the typical man pressure. So what they did is brought blitz pressure in the face of Fromm, who couldn't step into his throws, and the Georgia receivers could not get open. And he didn't have time to get the football effectively, so there was no chunk plays for Georgia. On the flip side, and this was the most surprising, was how well LSU ran the football against Georgia's defensive front. They did a poor job with their run fits, getting into the gaps when they were supposed to, hitting the wrong gap. They didn't get off blocks very well, and LSU ran the football 250, 260 yards. I mean, they controlled the game there. So that is what really changed the game, and I'm a little bit guilty of watching this Georgia team from the championship game last year and thinking that they're going to get better, they're talented. But as it went on, I probably gave them a little too much credit, and that's just a bad job on my part, because right now at least they're not that – I mean, they're good, but they're not nearly as good as they were last year, and particularly on the defensive front. Now, if they get some guys back healthy and certainly use the time wisely and use this as kind of a springboard towards, to finish the season. Remember last year they got just bushwhacked by Auburn, and it kind of turned them around. That team had a little better leadership defensively. Obviously, a couple of good defensive players that were big-time players. And I don't think that the backs are really good and talented. But, boy, they're not hitting the hole quite with the decisiveness that we saw the great backs of last year, particularly Michelle. So, I don't know. Right now, Georgia's Georgia's not in the class of Alabama. And in the early part of the year, anticipating, I thought, there's Alabama, and then Georgia's not far behind. Right now, I'd have to say that Georgia is not where they need to be. And we're very curious to see how much better they can get towards the end of the year and maybe whether they can close that gap or not.
Chris, if we went back to July and August that you and I were sitting here talking, you had doubts about this Auburn team then. I mean, I could go back and dig up the audio where you were talking about coaching. If it gets down to coaching, it's a mismatch that Auburn's going to lose a lot of the times if it comes down to coaching against certain coaches. And yeah, I heard you talk about the Auburn Tigers multiple times. I don't think anybody saw this coming other than you. I don't even know if you had them this bad. I mean, this is not a good football team.
No, it's no, I didn't have them this bad. I mean, I thought that I didn't think they were as good as some people thought. There were some people that were seeing them as maybe the biggest threat in the West, and maybe they can threaten Alabama, and I just didn't see that. But I didn't see this either. I didn't see Tennessee beating them. I thought that was a get better type of game last week for Auburn to where they get a win. And I'm going to tell you, this is a big, big game this week for them against Ole Miss because it is so negative, so toxic right now that this loss would just take that toxicity and just spike it even more. I hate it when listen. I know a lot of your fan base are probably excited, but I hate it when teams struggle. I want teams to do well. This team is really having a hard time finding their way, and it's a problem on the offensive line, but it's a bigger problem because they don't do anything to help out that weakness, and I think they've become very predictable on offense. And if they can't move the football on this Ole Miss defense that can't tackle anybody, it's going to get it's going to get nuclear in terms of because I'm telling you right now with the money they owe them, that president put them in a bad way, and I know that Jimmy Sexton played them and the whole Arkansas, and they just didn't want to get into the search and all that. But now they're in a darned if they do, darned if they don't mode there because this is going to get worse. It's the support of the program, or the support of Gus is at an all-time low. Ryan, I'm going to tell you, I talked with two members of that coaching staff last year. Let's go back even further than what I'm about to tell you. Remember the game, I don't know if you remember, Les Miles was the last game at LSU. That was in Auburn, and LSU scored on the last play. They reviewed it, and the snap didn't get off, and Les lost the job the next day. That was the lose of this game, go home type of game. Gus was in danger then. Then you go back to last year. Two coaches on that staff, when they blew the 20-point lead to LSU, told me that they were done, and it looked like clearly they were going to lose their job. And then they beat Georgia, then they beat Alabama, as we all know, and then the whole flirtation of the possibility of the Arkansas job, and he gets the big deal. So now they're, quote unquote, I hate to put it this way, kind of stuck with the deal that they made with him, or make a move, and that becomes a bad look and a foolish look, and not to mention an expensive look. But I don't take pleasure in other people's misery. They've got a miserable situation that, as I said, can you imagine if they lose to Ole Miss and they got to go into the open date and then come back and have A&M in Georgia and then after Liberty, Alabama? I mean, where's the next, other than Liberty, where's another win there? I mean, this is pretty bad.
Yeah, but Chris, the question has come up here in Tuscaloosa. Now you got to remember, I mean, we're all slanted toward Alabama, and most people that like Alabama doesn't like Auburn. Right. But the questions come up often this week is if they're sitting there. I mean, we're talking about a team that may go, especially if they lose this weekend. I mean, they could be trying to get bowl eligible. I mean, think about that. Can they afford to keep this guy? I mean, because I mean, how do you say, hey, give me your donations and whoo, that would be hard.
And here's the details of that. Now, they would have to pay him about $16 million within 30 days of termination.
Oh,
wow. And then they'd have to pay the rest over time, over the life of the contract, I believe. I haven't seen the contract. I've been told. So basically, they'd have to come up with $16 million just right away. I know that the money people would be willing to do it. But, are you comfortable who you can get, what direction you want to go? I think what you have to do is you have to weigh what you just said. And that's why I've mentioned it and used the term toxic, because that's how it's been phrased to me over there in the Plains. That is, if they go ahead and make a move, it does send a bad signal to the coaching profession that, what am I dealing with here? With people that would give a big contract one year and then fire a guy the next year. But then I think you can explain it to that, hey, the president panicked. He was kind of by himself. And I'm going to tell you, these coaches' agents negotiate deals and have the leverage, particularly when you have all the best coaches and all the name coaches like Jimmy Sexton has. He can play people, and they always win in the negotiations with ADs and presidents. And so I think what they would have to do is you've got to make the right hire, too. I mean, you got to make that run at the right guy, and you've got to weigh, what are you going to lose? Oh, the money people are going to close their checkbooks and not participate if you go forward with him? See, here's what I thought was going to happen, and I said it on my podcast. Gus is going to be there next year, and he's going to be there the year after. But I didn't anticipate the complete collapse. See, I thought they'd beat Tennessee, beat Ole Miss, and then, I know that A&M could go either way, likely a loss, Georgia lost, Alabama lost. But, I thought it would be enough to where it wasn't a disaster to where you don't even go to a bowl. But now you're dealing to a situation where perhaps, I know that's the conversation, I don't know what the result's going to be, that, wait a minute, if we keep them, how much is it going to cost us versus, what it's going to cost us to get rid of them? That's why I say it's a mess, because had this played out a little bit differently, it could have been a lot less expensive and a lot less painful to move on, because I think this is going to be very, 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 very painful financially to move on, even though I think it is a possibility and maybe becomes a probability if they lose out the rest of the way, say, for Liberty. It's a mess. It's beyond a mess.
We're talking to Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com, which is an awesome website. He talked about the podcast. They post every Tuesday and Thursday, and then we're talking about the new Rush the Field podcast every Wednesday. So new Landry Football podcast posted every Tuesday and Thursday, and the new The Rush the Field that's posted every Wednesday. Those are all great listens on LandryFootball.com. Let's go to Alabama, Tennessee. As you look at this game, I guess we're all convinced because they can play with Auburn, they can play with Alabama. Do you see that happening?
No, I don't. I mean, I think they'll play hard. First of all, on Tennessee, I don't want to leave the Auburn Tennessee game without giving Tennessee kudos for the job, because it's not their fault that Auburn's not playing well. Garantano played well, and I think that gives them some confidence. They've got big receivers. Chandler's a good back. I mean, they're not bereft of talent. Where they're not really good is at the line of scrimmage, and this is where this game is going to go sour for them. This is not certainly not a comparison of you play well. Now, it just goes to show you, though, that the optimism just kind of makes people go in different directions. I know the Tennessee fans are thinking, well, maybe we can play with them and all that. I wouldn't be honest with anybody if I said that their chances were all that good. I don't think Tennessee matches up. I don't think they match up, quite frankly, down the stretch. I think South Carolina, Kentucky are going to be tough, and then Missouri, Vanderbilt, they'll toss up games. But I think they're playing with more confidence, and I think what it does for that program is, for Jeremy, is it's an affirmation of what we're doing and what we're teaching you. If you listen, will work. And I thought they played well, and I thought they did a good job. I thought they did a good job attacking Auburn's protections and causing a lot of problems and negative plays. But this Tennessee program is still in bad shape. in terms of a personnel standpoint. Kentucky's got better personnel. They got a long way to go, and I don't see this being this game will be what Alabama makes of it, and what Alabama seems to make of it is we're going to play our game, and I would expect the game to be decisive win like it has been pretty much every game.
Let me ask you one quick question here. If you were Coach Saban, how do you think he'll handle Tua Tagovailoa? Do you think maybe they'll go in with an aggressive approach, score as early, and maybe try to get him a lot of rest? That knee can be an aggravating thing. It may be a little bit lingering. You got LSU in a couple of weeks. You got the bye week. How would you handle it if you're Nick Saban?
Well, here's the thing. I talked to a couple of coaches there, and they say that they swear that he is healthier this week, and I talked to him yesterday. So, that he was healthier Tuesday than he was last week. So, to me, that says that the soreness and the gingerness of the knee, that they're going to hold him out than you held him out last week. That he seems more ready in terms of health and soreness now than last week. And with the open date next week, I can pretty much assure you that unless something happens, that he's going to play. And I would think he's probably going to do what it's been every week this year: play a half and sit. I mean, that's been like it is. I don't see that changing. I've thought about it because people have asked me, and it's hard because I'm not there and I'm not dealing with the player. But I have thought about it, about the possibility of just sitting him completely and having him rest this week, having him rest next week on the open date. But, if he's moving around that well, then there's really no harm in practicing him and playing him. And then, if the thing about it is, hear me out on this. If you're a coach like Nick is, and he tells his players, like we just talked about, areas that they need to improve. Yeah, you may be winning by 50 points, but you're not doing A, B, and C well enough, and you're not playing with this type of focus. And you're preaching that to them week in and week out. What are you saying to your team if Tua is healthy and healthier than he was last week, and you sit him? What are you telling your team? Okay, this game's not as important? I mean, that's kind of what you're telling them, even though you're not saying it. So I get it, and ideally, from the outside looking in, hey, it would be good to just rest him and get completely healthy. Then do you break rhythm? Do you want him to get some work? He's going to have an open date next week. He's going to practice, but there's going to be some time off. Do you want to send a message to your team and start to develop bad habits? I'm telling you, I see it. I know a lot of your listeners may not follow a lot of college football around the country in detail, but I watch teams. I watch, for example, a West Virginia offense that it was playing really well, and then up against Kansas, they were like a little sloppy, and they couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden last week, they can't find their rear end with both hands against Iowa State. And I'm not making the comparison of the teams, but I'm making the comparison from a coaching standpoint. If you take the foot off the gas, you'd be surprised how some of the momentum goes away, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with a different set of issues. So I think for those reasons, that's the mindset of the head coach at Alabama, that I think they'll play him unless, again, there's something that happens to tweak it towards the end of the week. I think they'll play him, and they'll play, and they'll get a lead, and I think he'll be out, and it'll be Jerlin the rest of the way like it has been.
Hey, Chris, final question, and I got just a couple seconds. I want to make sure that we leave enough time to do your talk about your website here at the end. Mississippi State LSU, is that a game that really grabs you? Any chance the Dogs go to Baton Rouge?
Yeah, because here's the thing. Now, how do you handle prosperity? Everybody patting you on the back. I mean, Ed's not been in this position before. Ed Orgeron, to where the games get bigger. You remember when Kentucky started to win, and then oh yeah, we're going to beat A&M. Tell us what we're going to do against Georgia and Alabama. No, every game gets bigger the more you win. And, so now how do you deal with that? They were up for that Georgia game. I mean, they rushed the field in that game. I mean, my goodness, I was a little bit embarrassed by that, being a Tiger, that they rushed the field and beating the number 2 team, but they did. So now all of the week of pats on the backs. Now, how do you handle a quarterback that's going to be able to run? Do they have the discipline to do it? They got pounded by Mississippi State last year, so we'll see how they deal with it. It's going to be a challenge, no doubt.
All right, let me throw it back to you. I want to talk about LandryFootball.com because you guys are always doing some great work, and you continue to help out the hurricane victims, and certainly the damage has grabbed our attention here in Tuscaloosa. Let me throw it back to you and talk about LandryFootball.com.
Well, we're definitely doing that, and what I do with that, so people know, and it's just me because I never know where your money goes when you try to help folks. So what I do is I go up. We've got a group called the Cajun Navy here that is famous for going to different places that has hurricane victims, and so they're still going to the Carolinas, now the Floridas, the Georgia, the coast areas, and they have 18-wheelers that they load up every day, and they get lists from the shelters of what's needed. So I go to the Walmart, Target, and load up on the toiletries and whatever they say that they need, buy it, load the trunk up, dump it off, put it right on the truck, and again, off we go. So you know it's going to the right place. And all I do is when this happens, I say, look, if somebody becomes a member of LandryFootball.com, in addition to what I'm going to spend, I'm going to take half of what somebody spends, and I'm going to put it towards buying extra stuff. So it's a great way to get a look inside our website. We give you the game, the college and pro game, from a coaching and scouting perspective, breaking down the film, and you can try it out for a month or 3 months or 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever the case may be, which you'd like to. So if it involves players, teams, coaches, schemes on the college and NFL level, that's what we provide for you. So check us out at LandryFootball.com. We think you'll love it.
LandryFootball.com. Chris, as always, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great week.
Thank you so much. Take care, bud.